Three farm bills have been passed by the Parliament of India, but there are some protests going on in some parts of the country. What is this controversy? Let's dive deeper into it. Hello everyone,
I am Rahul Devzar.
I am Prasanna Naidu and you are listening to the Right Views podcast. In this episode, we are going to discuss these farm bills, the controversy, and how we can help the farmers. Okay, let's start from the actual start. These bills were introduced and passed as an ordinance before a few months ago, I think in June. But the protests are going on now, and the politicians and opposition parties are like amplifying it a lot now, and not when it was passed as an ordinance then. So, what's the actual controversy and why these people are protesting now instead of then? Rahul, can you explain this?
Actually, that is the most funny part about this because if you look at ordinance, when the parliament is not in session, government has the power to introduce laws which come into effect in the form of ordinance. Now, this ordinance is passed by the government of India and not by the parliament. So, this is, if such laws which are presented as ordinance there is a problem in the society, then the opposition parties should have actually asked the government to bring those laws, bring those ordinances in the parliamentary session right then. They should have started the protest back in June, not now. So there is definitely an ulterior motive behind this protest.
So what's the ulterior motive?
The ulterior motive is basically the elections which are coming very close. And it's like
Punjab elections.
And it's like in the IPL, the timing is everything. If you hit the ball too early, then you are going to get out. So in June, if the protest would have started, they would have fizzled out by now. Whereas if you start them now and you keep them active for some time, then probably you can draw on some benefits in the elections. But the interesting part is who are protesting, and that tells you the whole story. Now, in rural parts, we call them fortuner farmers. So, which means farmers who own the big SUV Toyota Fortuner, and they drive around in.
Who are these farmers who own these Fortuners
farmers,
and Toyota?
Actually, these farmers are very well-known people. Like they could be. I'm not saying they are, but some of them, like Amitabh Bachchan, is also a farmer.
Oh.
Then Supriya Sule is also a farmer, and pretty successful farmer at that. So
then maybe Sharad Pawar is also a farmer.
Sharad Pawar is the king of farmers, actually. So that apart, but there are many others who are basically politicians. They are government officials or ex-government officials who have channeled their illegal earnings into farm sector, and these people are the primary, protesters, and they have no real connection to subsistence farming or even farming and earning and breaking even from the produce. So they are not earning their livelihood from these farms that they are talking.
Okay, so these are the farmers who sit in the parliament.
Yes.
Who are protesting against the bill. Okay, so we came to know about fortuner farmers. Please note down this term. We may use it in later episodes too. Okay, let's now move forward with the bills. What's the problem with the bills? Some people are saying that it is good. It will help farmers grow their income. But some are opposing it. Why? Why is that?
So basically, if you look at the opposition to these bills come from two main quarters. One is the APMC Act, and these bills are trying to subvert the APMC Act, is what people say. And APMC Act is supposedly very beneficial to the farmers, and that's why it protects and gives farmers in theory at least, a higher price for their produce. So why are farmers bypassing this, and why is government wanting?
Before that, let's clarify. For those who don't know, APMC is Agricultural Produce Market Committee. So these committees are formed under an act, that is, I think, the APMC Act, right?
Exactly.
So, like, there are mandis, like markets under these APMC committees, where there are middlemen to which these farmers go and sell their produce.
Yes, not in that way, but what happens is each mandi is allocated a geographical area. So it could be, let's say, within a 15 square mile area or 20 square miles. This is ideal, but in actual, it's like 200-kilometer area is being served by one mandi. Somewhere it is 50, 45, like that. Yeah,
So these
farmers in
people
this
have,
geography have to go and sell their produce in this mandi. Now, in this mandi, there are representatives who are the middlemen we are talking about, and these, they are the traders. So they set up an auction where you sell your produce. Everyone who is producing cauliflowers will come to one person, and then whole lots will be auctioned, and then there will be some fees for the buyers, and the buyers can competitively sort of bid for all these cauliflowers, and because there are many buyers in one place, so the farmers will get better price.
how is this price
It is
decided?
an open auction system. So basically, if you go to that lot, for example, if you are in Western India, near, let's say, in one of the districts in the Western India, so you will get the buyers coming into your district and the sellers coming, which are the sellers are the local people, and they will come to your district. Let's say Pepsi wants to buy cauliflower for whatever reason, then Pepsi should ideally come to these mandis and then buy these cauliflowers, or Reliance Retail, for example, for their stores. So they will come to these mandis and they buy cauliflowers in like quintals or tons if they can, and that cauliflower will be sorted and then picked up. Now, if Reliance is there and also Big Basket is there or Big Bazaar is there, then they will have a fight, and then you will get a better price because Reliance wants
Basically,
better. Yeah, simple
basically the demand supply thing will
demand
come there.
supply. Exactly. So that is the broad theoretical approach of the mandi system.
Okay, now you can move forward with the problems what we have in the bill.
Yes, so this is sort of the principle behind the mandi, and the question these protesting people and other people are asking, why do farmers want to bypass this system which gives them better price and gives them better realization? There is a lot of more competition. Suppose if Pepsi were to approach one single farmer, then they will try to price, they will negotiate hard on price. If I will take produce from you, but you have to give me at a discount, and because farmer cannot really fight with Pepsi, so he will accept lower prices. That's the whole point, and there is a bit of truth to that, because there is always bargaining power, who buys and who sells. So if the seller is small, the buyer has the pricing power. So that is the argument. The second argument is on the Essential Commodities Act. Now, by operation of this bill, the Essential Commodity Act has been restricted to only times of crisis. So, government will not collect all these commodities during normal times. And that means there will be starvation, there will be shortage. What will there be? People will hoard all these commodities like tur dal, and they will not sell them, and then there will be overpriced, there will be shortage in the market, and then they will release slowly, is what people are worried about. So that is the essence of the protest basically. Then there are other small issues, but those are minor issues, which are basically, it's about political angles to this, but they are different.
I think there is also no authority where the farmers can go and complain about some malpractice or so.
There is provision in the act where the collector and the administrative authorities are given power to settle disputes. So which is the same process. There is no other, even in the mandis it's a different process within the same administrative setup. So it's not like a really different invention. There is no system. It's not like that.
Okay. And the main issue I've come across is that farmers are fearing that there will be no minimum support price.
Yes, that is the third leg of the protest. If there is no minimum support price, then who will buy? And So if you look at current procurement, I mean, hardly 10% of the procurement happens at MSP. Okay. And MSP, or the minimum support price, is acts more like a signaling mechanism rather than setting the price for the farmer or the buyer. So in many commodities, MSP is so low that the actual transactions are going up at way higher prices. In some other cases, the MSP is very high, but there is no offtake. So it's not like the price is being designed, but there has to be offtake by the government. So if you have 100 tons of produce and only 1 ton is being sold at MSP and 99 is being sold at lower than MSP, then what you want is average realized price, and that is not connected to anything because government has overstock of.
But why do these farmers accept the price below MSP?
See, there is MSP is not like MRP. Okay, so there is MSP is the price at which government will buy. That is the price set by the government that it will buy for its own stocking purposes. So it acts as a signaling mechanism. Apart from that, there is no. So what happens is, if you set a high MSP, let's say the market price is 80 and government says MSP is 100. So first, whatever is the requirement of government, that is filled. So government needs 500 tons. 500 tons get filled at MSP 100 rupees. But the produce is not 500 tons, it is 5,000 tons. So what about the 4,500 which are remaining? So they can't sell it, nobody is buying it. So what are you ready to pay me? So I am ready to pay you 80 rupees because that's the market price. So then that is paid at 80 rupees.
And what the government buys, where is it distributed?
So it goes to the Stocks and Food Corporation of India. Those are warehouses which are stocking all these essential commodities and then it is released through the PDS system.
Okay, so the public distribution
system, where you get on the ration card, you get 2 rupee rice, 2 rupee dal. Those things come from this MSP.
I have been into that queue in my childhood to get that sugar and rice. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So now what the act does is, basically it is removing all the middlemen, the representatives, I think the APMC, who used to buy directly from the farmers. And farmers have an option to either sell to APMC or sell it privately to any individual they want. Right? Correct. It depends on the demand, supply, and also other things. But in this scenario, farmers can have more profit. So why is it a problem to others?
So if you look at the aspect of these acts, the acts only are adding channels in which farmers can sell. So when the APMC Act was designed, if you see it was long back in 1950s, and when the APMC Act started coming into play, and the idea was that you will produce locally. Agriculture was a smaller segment of the economy. It was a larger segment of Indian economy, but the idea was that agriculture was not global business. So what happened was, whatever you produce locally would be sold locally and bought locally and consumed locally. It was let's say if we use a business parlance, the operations of the agriculture industry were local and the sales were also local and the price set was also local. Now this was the dimension in which this act came about. Now from 1950s to 2000s, the whole thing has changed. Now agriculture it's still local operation, but it's global pricing.
Because we are exporting a lot.
Because exports are available, and because many of these products could not be stored, they could not be transported. Now you can transport them through refrigerated containers. You can store them in cold storage facilities across the country. So even things like apples, which were only available in certain locations, now you can get apples right up to Chennai. Any part of the world you get apples where they are supposed to be grown in only cooler climates. You can get almost mangoes throughout which variety is different, but you will get some sort of mango across the year. You will get some sort of watermelons across the year. So these were seasonal foods, but those can be done. So agriculture has transformed. But now the farmer is still required to sell locally, set price locally, operate locally, whereas things are moving global. In this difference, what happened was the middlemen, they use the global price signals, they use the national price signals, they use the state level price signals, and they suppress the farmer's earning by accumulating stock or releasing stock at the wrong time, so that the farmers get in a big soup. So because farmers at the time of sowing, that is in June, July, when monsoon arrives, they have no visibility on what is the price that they are going to get. So if you sow, let's say if you are producing onion, so at the time of producing, it's like 35 rupees per kg. So you sow, and then you by the time everyone is sowing onion only. By the time the harvest time comes, there is whole lot of onion. You can get it at 2 rupees per kg for them. So that is not even covering the cost of the plantation. Forget labor. Just the whole amount of water they have spent on that crop, the amount of fertilizer they have spent on the crop, insecticide, that is also not covered. Then, they sell this produce to middlemen. The middlemen accumulate the stocks. Then government opens the export market and the prices shoot up from 3 to 15. And guess who gets the 3 to 15 margin?
Yeah.
So this is the whole game. And because farmers are only required to sell to these people stop all the price signals from coming to them. So if Pepsi was, or any of these companies wanted to buy from the farmer, they say ki this guy gives a good product. So I will tell him ki next year you sell all your onions to me. I will pay you 12 rupees, which is the market rate today. And they are ready to sign the contract with him. So he gets a sure shot price of 12 rupees, and he is going to invest in his farm accordingly. He will not invest 24 rupees. He will invest 5 rupees or 10 rupees, and he will make the 2 rupees or 3 rupees profit. So why not? And again, if he wants, he can sell it through APMC. He has got another option. So why not? That's the question. So in effect, what happens is you get more market. You get market opportunity. So if you look at agriculture, if you want, the whole game is about making the farmers profitable and making their incomes and livelihoods more sustainable so that they don't commit suicide. They are able to repay their loans. Government doesn't have to, write off their farm loan waiver is almost every 2 years, something or the other has to come up. All that goes away. So how to ensure that? So in theory, you can have basically the principle for improving farming is basically 5 points are there. One is what is called agriculture extension, which is basically technical support. What seeds to take, what fertilizer, how much, which pesticide, when to put, when to sow, when to reap, how much water, when to give water, not too much, not too little. All those things are called technical inputs, which are called agricultural extension. So that is one part. The second is basically if farmer needs money because he doesn't have money. So credit availability. He needs the loan from which he will buy seeds, fertilizers and all those things. So that is credit availability. Then third part, which is what these bills are accessing, is market access. He should be able to sell his produce in multiple channels. From wherever he gets the best price, he should be able to sell. So if a hotel chain wants to get, like in Japan, they have an auction of fish, the biggest or the best trout or whatever fish, or they have multiple fishes. And the restaurant chains bid that fish. Some of the fish itself sells for $1 million. So if such an auction site is set up by some online ventures, farmers will be happy to sell it. But there are two more elements to making farmers profitable, and that is basically what is missing in these bills, and that is the risk management systems, which is basically a way to help farmers reduce its risk. And the fifth one is your value addition. So if then we can go in detail with all of them.
But I think there is an option for contract farming. So that would be like the risk management point would be covered there, right?
Yes, but like contract is a market access. It's not really a risk management, because risk management is at what price you make a contract. So contract by itself reduces risk. But let's say if I am not aware of what is the situation globally, or whatever the situation nationally. Let's say in the nation there is a mood that everyone is going to buy, ginger. Just for whatever ginger ale is going to take off or something of that sort. And I am supposed to be in a contract farming, and I am writing a contract accepting a term that I will sell you at 10 rupees per kg for the next 5 years. So it's not risk management for me, because I have actually increased my risk, because the outside the price is, going to be 115, not 15. So then
So
I
yeah,
am
it
shocked.
has two sides.
So it has two sides. So how will I be able to make that decision? Is through knowledge, through information. And like, if you want to discuss the risk management side, you can look at oil industry. So oil industry is also commodity industry, and it has the same basically, character as an agricultural industry, except that it has one key difference. It is a very capitally, high capital investment industry. Agriculture is very small farmers altogether. Oil industry is like five big players which have, like, each of them have a turnover which is bigger than many countries. So why is this? That is because oil industry has a mechanism where all the futures, options, commodity trading, that whole thing tells them whether this oil at $45, which is my cost, is it profitable or not? Should I drill this well or not? That is what is known to them at the time of drilling. Basically, if you go in detail, oil investments are spread out over 7, 8, 10 years. In deep water, it is like 40, 50 years. But farming, we are not able to give the farmer a sense that whether planting this crop, which is whatever you want to plant eggplant, let's say, or you want to do staples like cotton, you want to plant cotton, then what is the price that you will approximately gain? You cannot tell them. So by the time, this year, if cotton is costly, everyone plants cotton. And next year it's like flooding of cotton. Nobody wants to buy cotton. Boss, cotton hai to throw it away. Why? Because there is no price for cotton. 2 rupees I will give you. They say कि my transport cost is also not covered. They say कि that's, I'm giving you a favor by buying it. So this is the thing that happens. So if price information of some sort, like ITC has developed eChopal, where they use the eChopal system to procure wheat from the mandis and all these places. They give the real time price that we are procuring at this price, and farmers are getting better realizations. Now that system can technically, if you do it at the national level, which is what the government meant by setting up a ENAM, or Electronic National Agricultural Market. That was the first reform that they got about, I think, 2 years back or 3 years back. So that creates that market. Now, simply having a market and nothing in it is of no use. You have to have futures, options. So let's say if I'm Maggi noodles, if I'm Nestle, I'm wanting to make Maggi noodles with some masala spices, I can say ki I'm going to need 10 tons of these spices over the next years. And I can see the prices and I can tell them, okay, why don't you, I want to sell it at 25 rupees, these packets. So I will buy this spices at this price. The more you tell the farmer, the easier the farmers will react. And if let's say Nestle tells I want to buy only 100 tons, finished, 100 tons is over, then people will not plant those things. Okay. So those are the risk management things which can come in.
So more awareness and education is also necessary regarding this, right?
Yes. So how to run a sophisticated agriculture business, a modern day agriculture business needs to be brought in. Now that will require similar risk management skills as in any other commodity business, in in metals or in any other commodity or any other modern business.
So basically, what you are proposing is some big giant like maybe Reliance or Mahindra or someone must enter into the agricultural market too, so
Not at
that
all. Not at all. Actually, what I'm saying is ki, the basic premise is that ki, this has to be done and farmers have to benefit from it. Now, who can set up a huge network, a market
so these
for,
people can help the farmers.
no, market, the responsibility of setting up markets is actually governments. So governments, the whole responsibility is basically have your borders, guard your borders.
Can we trust the government that they uh, implemented it in such a sophisticated manner?
See, I mean, if you technically see, a stock market is also a market which is, it's a private company, but it is a national company. Okay, NSE, National Stock
NS,
Exchange, or things like that. BSE is like a
huh,
mandi, which is run by the brokers. Okay,
hmm,
NSE is run by, it's a conglomeration of banks which are running the market, but it is a nationalized market. Now, when the
hmm.
market is run and it's an efficient market, the brokers make money, but they make only a percentage. The main money is made by the people who set up these, to supply the goods. So that is the objective of this, that the farmers make money and brokers provide a service at a fee, but their fee is a percentage, not multiple of farmers' income. The farmer is earning 100, the broker is earning 10,000. This is not to be done. Farmer should earn 10,000, broker should earn 120 or 1,000. Why not? And then there will be more sophisticated brokers, not only those with connections. So you and I can also become a broker and help negotiate this contract between a company. Let's say a company which is buying hundreds of kgs of stuff. They don't want to, deal with one by one every farmer. So they will engage some company to go and meet with the farmers and create buying at a lower cost but high quality buying. Product should be good. So basically, if you go in any of these Reliance Fresh or and go to the vegetable section, many of these vegetables are so almost dead. The people say, don't buy it from them, buy it from outside because they are fresh. That whole thing will change, and they will get the good produce at a good price, and they will be able to ensure higher quality supplies at lower prices. So Reliance, when you go to a supermarket, you will get better quality apples, better quality, tur or whatever dal or rice, wheat, and then it will be at a lower cost.
So this is also one fear which the opposition is pressing on, that the current act will help all the corporations to hack the agricultural sector. And even you are saying that this must not happen. I think what's the problem in that if they enter?
See, it is not like corporations can enter. They have no problem. I have no problem in corporations entering. I have a problem in corporations setting up a market. Okay, market is a social good which government should set up, and they have set up. It's an ENAM. Okay, so all these corporates should be a buyer in those markets. So you go to, they should go to ENAM. Like all this, anyone who wants to, let's say, Domino's Pizza wants to procure all the wheat and whatever they need for, they should go to ENAM. They should have an account. Domino's Pizza is setting up an order कि मेरे को 10,000 kilograms of ये चाहिए, 50,000 tons of ये चाहिए, and then all these things they set up, and then farmers say I can give you 5 tons, and then they say okay, I accept 5 tons order out of that. So I am selling 5 tons of wheat to Domino's, sitting in, I don't know, Andhra or Madhya Pradesh, and the guy in West Bengal is selling rice to Domino's, and this can happen. I mean, there is nothing limiting that, and that will create value for the farmer, because farmer can see what price they are ready to offer. So Domino's says, I want to offer at 20 rupees. So whoever is the cheapest farmer who can guarantee that quality. So it need not be farmer from Punjab who can give you that quality. Farmer from, Orissa, he might be able to do it at that price. He says 20 rupees is good for me. He can do it in 20 rupees. the quality is good, then of course, why not? So he will benefit suddenly. And the Punjab farmer can farm something else which is more valuable.
Yeah. Okay. So you were talking about the value addition in all those 5 points you explained. So can you tell us more about value addition?
So basically, when we talk about farmers' incomes, so one is to have more marketing and more channels to for the farmers to sell their produce. But other is to have much more valuable produce to sell. Now, for example, let's say if I have a fruit, then it is perishable, it has got X value. If I turn it into jam, then it has got 10x value and it is not perishable anymore. So this is the basis, and it is, in agriculture chain is evaluated from, basically it's called farm to fork. So at one end you have the farmer, and the other end you have a chef like Sanjeev Kapoor or some such chef. Now, if you see that farmer produces something which gets transformed and gets transformed and gets transformed and reaches Sanjeev Kapoor's kitchen, and he makes a dish, and then you get the dish and then you eat it, and that's where the whole thing ends, and that is the whole chain. So you pay the premium price for that Sanjeev Kapoor dish. Sanjeev Kapoor in it, by himself will pay a premium for whatever he buys from the farmer. Now, what can be added to this? So that is the question. So basically, if you want value addition, then you want to set up all different kinds of food processing units. Now it cannot be, now in West they have simple sauce, jam and mixes kind of approach to food. In India, we have the masala combos approach to food. So, we have like different kinds of masalas, and then, we have the staple foods masala, and then you get your dish. So, can we invent something? Can all these companies come together? And now, when you have access to quality raw materials, these innovations will start, where companies will come, like Maggi has started selling its spice mix, only spice mix. They are not selling the noodles anymore. They are only selling the spice mix. Now, why are they selling the spice mix? Because they realize that noodles is X value, but spice mix has the better value. So let's create that spice mix and sell it. So why not companies come together and they start innovating, and then they create this value addition, and then you will find that these companies will be ready to pay higher price because they are getting more and more money in return of this. So farmers will themselves set up these kinds of units, like in milk processing they have done. So farmers are producing milk, cheese, butter, everything, and then they are getting more value for that same amount of raw milk that they produce. Similarly, they can get more value from the raw agricultural produce that they get. Even today, farmers don't, mill their grains. What stops them? So there is separate milling stations. Now, milling is not such a complicated machine, but you can think about lots of things can be done by these innovations.
Yeah, and I think not much cost will be incurred in setting up a mill, right?
No, it's not a costly thing at all. But the thing is that it's like some of the things have already traditionally been done in a way, because investments are not coming. So once farmers have money, then they will explore these avenues. So innovation happens when people have money across the chain. So farmers have money, they will start, instead of selling grain, they will start selling, maybe the flour. Or they may be, saying ki I will give you not just the powder flour, but I will give you the dough or something of that sort. They will invent something, and then you will get better and better quality. Now, if you try, we had so many grains. Okay, wheat and rice were the only one part, but there were a lot of millets which we use. Ragi is almost disappeared in modern thing. They might stage a comeback because farmers know how to use it and make it more tasty and what dishes to make.
Yeah.
They will tell you and they say कि उसमें तो X 10 rupees value मिलता है wheat में because there is a lot of competition. रागी में मेरे को 20 rupees मिलता है even though MRP is only 30 rupees but I get 20 rupees. It's a better deal.
Exactly. And these are actually more healthy than Bonvita and
yeah.
Horlicks.
And you imagine that, if you ask globally, what is one thing that they would want more of? They say Indian food. And they are talking about basically Punjabi food or South Indian food. When they get all these flavors, they say that there is no end to Indian food. Bring it on.
Yeah.
So there is enough opportunity, and we can't sell rice and wheat grain in the world market because your rice grain is same as European rice grain or European wheat grain is same as your wheat grain, or there is better, ours is better, there is a competition, still you get lower price.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If you sell, something else, then you get more value.
A product, some product
Yes.
from that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
Just like the magic masala example.
magic masala. Magic masala is an additive, but you look at it, the grapes. They created wines, and wines are now having X value. There is, or 100X value of grapes.
For example, we can like sell some laddus made of ragi or something.
Yeah.
That would be a great thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And then your ragi will become more popular. And
then
nobody
you
can
come to know
produce
that
ragi.
that is made of these grains, and they'll be like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you can set up different. So all this requires those investment, like, I don't know if you're familiar with Chitare Bandhu. Chitare Bandhu makes 50 products, but they source all the ingredients locally. All they can buy now from, contract farming. They will be very happy to do it. And they will get good quality stuff. Your Haldirams. Now you have standardized their rasgullas and those sweets. But now, because they are milk based, milk is quite organized industry. But now you can standardize even their, bhujiyas and all these. Those also will get much better. Okay. Even those are standardized, but many other
yeah, not much popular.
Yeah, so those products, those will start getting popularized because quality becomes, you can
the main factor.
Yeah, you can control quality. I know this farmer is good, that farmer is not good. I'll give him better price than that farmer. All this differentiation happens.
Okay, so we have, I think, covered all the main points regarding the bills and pros and cons of this current legislation. Any final words, Rahul?
So broadly, we have covered everything, I think. So, in a nutshell, these bills are a good first step. That's what we can say, or a good second step if you call few of these other legislation as first step. But there is more to be done. And in fact, I wrote an article saying that this is only the initial step and more needs to be done. And there is also another research paper which I wrote about how to cover the risk management element of the farming by setting up something what I have called as smart agriculture management system. So that takes care of the risk management for farmers, and that can be set up by government itself. So we'll provide those links in the description.
Okay, for sure, we'll include those links in the show notes below. And if you want to know more about the smart agricultural management system, do read that paper and the Money Life article. Thank you for listening to this podcast. We'll come up with a new episode next week. Thank you.
Thank you.